I was asked, could I do a video on what are the cheapest surplus masks, so I'm going to do just that. But before I start, I should say bear in mind that surplus markets change all the time, and if you're in one country and not another, certain masks are going to be, in less supply, so there might be more demand, the prices will change. So nothing I say in this video is going to be 100% concrete forever. And I'm obviously looking at it from a UK perspective. If you're in different countries, the prices may vary a lot. I imagine in most of Western Europe and America that you get around the same amount of supply of masks. So obviously one of the most famous masks ever made, the cheapest one on the surplus market nearly all the time, is the Soviet GP5 respirator. So what's the GP5? I'm sure many of you know, but the GP5 is basically a latex hood, an intake and outtake valve at the bottom, two eyepieces. Remember, the green filters that come with these are confirmed to contain asbestos. If you buy one as a novelty, don't use the Soviet filter. If you want to get another filter, I've done videos detailing how you can get another filter to fit it, but it's a very simple hood mask. Simply put it on like that. A very simple mask, very effective. But that's your GP5. As said, it's very simple. On the surplus market you can often find these with the bag and everything, like this one, for as little as £10. Sometimes they're more than that, sometimes you can get the mask on its own for less. As said, the prices of these vary all the time, so I can't give you a concrete number on what it's going to cost you. Next we have another Soviet sort of satellite mask. This is one that was made by two Warsaw PACT countries. It's either the Polish MC1 or the Czech CM3, depending on which variant of the mask you get. So I'll get that out to show you. It's this one. Again, don't use a filter that comes with this mask. Any Warsaw PACT mask, it's not a good idea to use the filter. But there's this mask, and as said, this is another very cheap one. You should get it for around GP5 prices. Anywhere from about 10 to £20 range, I'd say. So this is the Polish MC1, but the Czech CM3 applies to the same rules. So there's those two masks. Now, what I will say of this video is, generally Warsaw PACT and Soviet masks are very cheap. So although I've got a few examples of these in the video, I'm not going to make the entire video just Soviet masks, because in relation to price, often the Soviet masks end up being very cheap. So rather than, do an entire video on Soviet masks, we're going to look at some other examples now. So, what else have we got? The French M51. I think this is a Belgian export model I have here, but again, this is quite a famous mask, made in the 1950s. The original filter for this mask was not safe, however later versions of the mask come with different filters. I've got an Avon filter on there, so it's not actually, one of the original filters, but this video is also not about buying masks for how good they are on the surplus market, it's just about what's cheapest. So for example, with this M51, you have this rubber exhale valve here. These are very prone to breaking. You can probably see it's very thin rubber from the fact you can actually see through it. So on a lot of these, that rubber has totally worn away, and the mask would be useless unless you found some way of, patching it up with more rubber. So it's a weird strap system on this mask. You put it on your head like that, and then you have to pull the bottom of the straps onto these metal hooks. Then you've got your face seal. So again, this is a very cheap mask. Often you see these close to £10 with the bag in the UK. They're not brilliant masks. I've said a lot of bad things about them in the past, but they are actually alright if you just want a cheap surplus gas mask. I kind of like these, not gonna lie. They've got their sort of charm to them, but it's not a brilliant fitting mask. And as I said, it's got some design flaws. And as I've said on lots of videos regarding this mask, the poor French soldiers in the Gulf War were issued with these. So they had to wear these really heavy rubber, quite uncomfortable looking NBC suits, but with these masks with expired filters on them. So a lot of them would have just instantly died in a gas attack, and they wore all that protective equipment that was, you know, very uncomfortable for nothing. But as I said, I kind of like this mask. The bag is also very nice, robust, sort of canvasy thing. I know some people buy these bags to repurpose them for other things, and I don't blame them, because this bag is, you know, really solid and good. Better quality bag than the mask, I would say. Another one, this is a damaged one. This is actually an M62. But German or West German M62 and M65 gas masks. This one's missing its straps. Again, these turn up very cheaply on the surplus market, normally under £20 for these. They're actually very good quality masks, but a lot of people, including myself, have problems getting them to make a good fit with our faces. A lot of people complain about that. There's also clones of them that will turn up very cheaply as well on the surplus market. Another good example is the British light anti-gas respirator from World War II. Made in World War II by Britain and a while afterwards. Lots of these were bought by Denmark as surplus and then resold onto the surplus market when they were done with them. 60mm intake. It's a good mask. The Canadian C3 is also quite often quite cheap as well, so if you can't find this one, have a look for a Canadian C3. The original filters for these probably contain asbestos, or do contain asbestos, but often if you get them they'll either come with a 60 to 40mm filter converter, or a modern, or a more modern I should say, because people don't use it anymore, 60mm filter. Another one that often turns up cheap on the surplus market is the Nokia M61. It's a clone, sort of redesign of the American M9 gas mask. There's also a third generation of this mask that has a voice diaphragm on it. And there is also the Yugoslav M1, which is another copy of the American M9. Apart from this being a bit antiquated and having a 60mm filter, I really like this mask. It's actually quite comfortable. It's made from nice rubber. That's it, it's made by Nokia, funnily enough. Before they made mobile phones, they made gas masks. So as I said, this is Nokia M61. I actually think it's a really comfortable gas mask. It's a bit antiquated. Like the Canadian C3 and light anti-gas respirator. 60mm filter. But often they turn up really cheap. And as I said, it's made by Nokia, which is quite interesting. The company that now makes mobile phones used to make gas masks. And also, last one for this list is the Czech M10 or M10m. This one is the M10m. It's a cheek filter mask. You all know I hate cheek filter masks, but it's quite a cool thing. I sort of like this mask. I think the M10m out of all the cheek filter masks I have is probably my favourite. It's got a voice diaphragm and a drinking tube and the cheek filters. In general, the M10 is cheaper. The M10 does not have a drinking tube, but other than that it's the same mask. There is also, the thing I really like about this M10m is it came with this sort of rubberized, really nice bag. The annoying thing has been that when I've got my M10 and I also bought another M10m carry bag, they've been much cheaper kind of carry satchels. If I could find somewhere that just simply sold these, I'd be happy, because I buy just a couple of them as general use things, but so there we go. It's a giant bulky M17 clone known as the M10m, but it's quite a cool thing. I sort of like this mask, even though a lot of people get the impression I don't. I just hate cheek filter masks as a design, but the M10, when it's all together and you've had the frustration of getting the cheek filters in, I quite like it. They're not very functional though, bear in mind, because cheek filters expire all the time when you have them open, and nobody makes new filters for this mask. So you're always buying out of date filters for it. As soon as you open them and start putting them into the mask, they begin reacting to the air. So the masks aren't actually very good for anything except for use against tear gas, or maybe removing things like asbestos, where you just want to use it as a particulate respirator. It's a cool chunky thing, because it's an M17 clone. You know, it's really bulky. quite heavy compared to normal gas masks, although again these are meant to be lightweight. But as a cheap surplus mask, the actual M10 is normally £10 to £20, the M10m anywhere up to £30, but often cheaper. Now, as a general rule, masks from your own country generally tend to be cheaper. Not always, but most of the time, and sometimes masks will enter the market, you know, and be priced very cheaply. Often lots of civilian respirators. I use a GP5 in this video because it's the best example of it, but lots of nations built, you know, respirators for civilian populations and never issued them. So basically those masks will end up being very cheap in your country, maybe, if your country made a lot of them. So there's the list of cheap surplus gas masks. Take your pick out of any of them, it's just some ideas, and as I said, it's not a conclusive list because there are many more that didn't make this video but are also quite cheap.